Something that I think was just as disappointing, at least to critics. I'm more interested to hear your taste. Was Pacific Rim Uprising, the sequel to 2013's Pacific Rim. The Guillermo del Toro directed, Charlie Hunnam, Idris Elba starring. I don't know, major block. Was it a blockbuster? I don't even really remember. I don't think I saw it in theaters.
No, it underperformed, but it did a lot better first weekend than Uprising did. Uprising did like late the high 20s, but yeah, I think the most interesting thing about Pacific Rim Uprising, a movie that's not good, and even if you're trying to review a kids movie, a movie that should have been a lot better, the most disappointing thing about it, or interesting about it rather, is that it's 5 years after the sequel. Del Toro's not involved anymore. There's a lot of production woes with getting this sequel made. Del Toro was attached, then he wasn't. Uh, the director that they did pick was Stephen DeKnight, a director that has a reputation that nobody is familiar with because you don't know anything that he's done because he hasn't made anything great. And it kind of shows because this is everything about this was just so like phoned in. And it's weird too because Pacific Rim, the original, the concept is really simple. It's a really high concept. It's big mech suits, Jaegers fight big monsters called kaijus, right? It's pretty simple, right? And Del Toro is really inspired by like a lot of anime big stuff, like pre Gundam and whatnot to make the movie. And it should have been better than it was. But then when you have this sequel, the sequel takes it into like the light. The original, all the fights happen like on the ocean at night. It was really dark. But the sequel, you have all these bright lights, and it shows you how like lame and lazy all these Jaeger and Kaiju designs are. And then you also get to see John Boyega, who's the best part of the movie, actually doing an English accent for the first time really since Attack the Block. So the first time since he became famous, he actually gets to use his native accent, which I'm sure he was happy about that. Sure. And he's lifelike. He delivers the shitty lines as well as he can. But also there you have Scott Eastwood, who was in most recently in The Fate of the Furious, one of Clint Eastwood's kids. And it's funny. He might be perfectly cast or he might be horrendously cast because acting is so fucking wooden, but he's also delivering really shitty lines. So maybe, and his character they kind of make fun of him for being just like a pretty boy. So it almost like makes sense that they would cast someone like Scott Eastwood, who's not actually good at acting. But then when you go from there, the story is somehow more convoluted than something that seems so simple should be. I don't need to get into it, but it doesn't matter. But it was just more confusing and ridiculous than I expected. Also, there's this whole subplot about these kids, and they're all really bad actors and a lot of cringy dialogue there, and you just don't care about any of those characters. And it's just so weird that this turned out so poorly because Charlie Hunnam kind of sleptwalked through Pacific Rim. Idris was the best part of it. His final speech about canceling the apocalypse is actually pretty epic. But, getting rid of Hunnam and bringing in Boyega would have made a lot of sense. And he's Idris's son, in the story. But everything else is just so poor that there's really nothing to, be happy about with this movie. It's just like it's like one of the worst Transformers movies of that quality. So, again, the most interesting thing to me is just how the movie got from the original to this point. Because actually watching it doesn't really bring you much enjoyment. Yeah.
This isn't a movie I was planning to see. I'm not really into like the big like monster Transformer type movies, so this wasn't something that really interests me. I think I've only caught Pacific Rim in bits and pieces on my television whenever it's on. But the only thing I really cared about from this is John Boyega being good, because I mean he was in The Circle. What else has he been in?
Barely.
Star Wars. In Star Wars, even that he was like injured for the end of the first one into this one, and then he had that weird subplot with Rose, and it's kind of like, what is John Boyega doing, dog? But I'm glad to hear he was lifelike. I feel like he needs to have a good movie come out that's not Star Wars. I'd like to see him potentially be Bond. I'd like to see him do something that's a little bit more charming and maybe a little bit less like things blow up or there's a conspiracy about a Bill Gates type or a Steve Jobs type figure with the circle. But
Sure,
man,
sure.
I don't know.
Yeah, no, and like another thing too, just to wrap. I mean, he was in Detroit. Give him credit for that.
Right,
I know
that's
that
true.
didn't make a lot of money, but that was a good choice. But the other thing about Pacific Rim too is in the original there was this whole big part about the story about how the two co-pilots in the Jaeger, the mechs, they have like their minds have to like be compatible, right? And
Mm-hmm.
to do it successfully. And it was a big part of the story, and at least it was something original, right? That's has no impact on this movie at all. It's just totally thrown in there. Like it actually had like emotional weight in the first one.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that was probably one that he brought to the movie. And yeah, it just doesn't fucking matter at all this time around. Just stupid plot device once they need it, you know? So just another example of the movie just being a total failure to launch. But hey, I think audiences showed that and made like 28 million first week. It was an expensive movie still, even though it didn't look as great as it should have. And I think we've kind of seen that the past, I think Summer 2016, you really saw this too until now is blockbusters that don't look that great and then they turn out to not be that great are not doing as well as they used to. This movie would have made a lot more money 10 years ago, but audiences are more fickle and they're learning. So you got to do better with your expensive ass movies.
Yeah, although it did unseat Black Panther, which made 17 million. Crazy
Oh.
that Black Panther in
Weekend 6, about time
Yeah.
somebody unseated. It's Tomb Raider. Tomb Raider should have done this
Yeah.
the week before. Let's be real.
I agree with that. So I think we're going to have a lot to talk about with Black Panther after next week, after March ends. We'll kind of recap the run that's had. But hopefully we'll have some good movies on the horizon. Ready Player One and Isle of Dogs both move into wider release this week. So we're going to, I think, both see that and both see both of those and talk about that next week. So we can cleanse our palate a bit.